Hey, my name is Eva, and this is Blond Quantum, the podcast that breaks down quantum technology into real-world business impact. Here, we make the complex simple. No equation, no overthinking. Just insight, innovation, and a bit of humor. So don't worry, you don't need a PhD in physics to follow. In each episode, I talk to founders, scientists, and investors about how quantum is reshaping the industries today, not in some distant future. Oh, and if you hear a black cat purring in the background, that's my co-host, very alive Schrodinger's cat, joining the conversation. Her name is Moon. Let's get started. Hello everyone, and welcome in the next episode of Blond Quantum. Today with me is a special guest, is Olivier Tonneau from Quantonation, a partner of Quantonation. Olivier, thank you so much for joining us today.
Morning, Eva.
Good morning. I know that you just have accomplished a beautiful, amazing milestone, and you closed the second fund of 200 million euro. Right? And the round was oversubscribed. So first of all, congratulations. It's a big
Thank you.
And please tell me, what is this milestone means for you and as well for the quantum ecosystem?
Well, first, it's nice that the fund was oversubscribed. It accelerated in the last few weeks. Well, actually, I think it also reflects what's happening in quantum these days. 2025, there was about 10 billion invested in quantum startups. And so I believe that closing our fundraise reflects also that there is some appetite, not only for listed companies, but also for private ones.
Fantastic. And are you right now, does it make you the biggest fund in the world right now, focusing on quantum specifically?
So we have two funds that are open and running, and so the first one was 91. We have a few special purpose vehicles as well. So in total, we are managing 320 million euros. So yes, which make us the biggest dedicated
Focus.
investor, to that.
Congratulations, that's amazing number. So let's talk a little bit about the beginning of where it all started. So I know Quantonation was founded in 2018, and you guys were one of the first movers on that market, right? So there's nobody else looking into yet, and the other investors weren't there yet. So please tell me what convinced you that was the right moment to, leave your stable job, leave your career, and out of the sudden set up a fund focusing specifically on that such a small niche that time?
Actually, it's kind of combination of things and, stars aligning. So I was working in a family office, and we started to see our first company in quantum. It was a sensing company back in 2012.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So we started looking at the field. My former boss was interested in that, and he was getting courses at the Collège de France on quantum physics. And at some point, said, okay, the sector is starting to mature. Let's look at how we could address this, doing 2-3 investments. And then we started looking, and there was no fund around, and we thought, we can build something that does not exist yet. And that's the time when we reconnected with my co-founder, Christophe. So Christophe is a quantum PhD, and I mean, there's no chance we could do that without a quantum PhD. And by the way, Christophe was already back in the quantum in the quantum field, because he was running business development for one of the early startups there. So Christophe was convinced that there was an opportunity to do a fund, because he had seen that there were some companies it was a bit more advanced in the US, and so Christophe, being back in quantum as early as 2015, really saw the opportunity, and so that's when we decided to start the fund together.
Congratulations. That's amazing. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the portfolio itself. I know last year you were investing in more than 33 startups. This year is like what, 35, 38?
So I think we're standing at 37.
37,
We have 3 deals cooking, so hopefully reaching 40 by mid-year.
Keep my fingers crossed. So can you tell us a little bit more about those startups in your portfolio? Like, first of all, geographically, I have heard as well that you're investing across the whole globe. So let's talk about this. And the second thing, tell us about the most prospective startups in your portfolio, and what do you think accelerate their growth?
Yeah, well, a lot of questions.
Sorry, yeah.
So to start with the first one, we are quite focused as a fund, so we need to be global because if we were that focused and picked only a small geographic footprint, then that would be very difficult. But over the years and having a look worldwide, we have screened more than 1,000 companies. To achieve these 35 investments. So that means we can have the level of selectivity that's normal for a VC fund. Now, if we look at the breakdown, the geography breakdown, the majority of the company would be in Europe, but we also have a lot in the US and in Canada. We've made an investment in Australia as well, and we are currently looking at companies in Japan and in Singapore.
Fantastic.
So, I mean, we really want to find the best science and the best people to develop nice companies out of this science, and this is a global play.
And the screening this 1,000 company that you mentioned, maybe it's worth as well to mention for our audience that you have 3 offices, right, running this. So the headquarters is in Paris, but you also have office in Dallas and in New York.
So yes, and we will also open a subsidiary in Singapore. So yeah, no, for sure. The US is a very important market for us, and we want to be more present, more active. It's been a big part of our fundraise for Quantonation 2, and I mean, given the potential, it's also a big part of where we can deploy and where we can fundraise. And so when we are interested in an ecosystem, the things we are looking is we need to have some top-notch academy and research labs. We need to have some startup ecosystem. We need to have some investors, co-investors, some potential users, so large corporate as well, and the support of public authorities. And I mean, there's no 100%. Better country for that than the US, of course, and then Europe.
So speaking of the ecosystems, actually, Olivier, so in last episode, I had the chance to talk with Andre Koenig, and we were a little bit divagate about the different ecosystems around the world. You have a portfolio, which, as you said, exactly, mostly in Europe, some in the US, some in Australia, in Japan, and other places. Can you please let our audience know what's your view on the ecosystems around the world, and where will you see, like, you know, the biggest amount spent by government to the research, when you see the biggest amount of the startups? Which market are the hottest right now, in one sense?
Yeah, I think it's about 20 ecosystems worldwide. I would say the US, mostly on the East Coast, a bit at Caltech as well. It would be Canada, 2 or 3 hotspots as well. In Europe, 5 or 6 countries of interest. The UK, of course. Then you have interesting things in the Middle East, for example, with TII in Abu Dhabi, or Saudi Arabia also, and Qatar also putting up a nice effort. And then in Asia Pacific would be Australia, Singapore, Japan, and Korea. It's not by chance. It's countries where there is a high level of science and there is involvement from the government to develop some startup ecosystem, industry, and so on. So it's about, let's say, 20 ecosystems, but they are all very dynamic. Difficult to just pick one.
So basically everyone is catching up right now.
Yeah, there's a lot. And of course, I mean, the elephant in the room, there's China as well.
I was about to ask. Great that you mentioned that, because nobody wants to talk about it.
I mean, it's of course very nice science. They publish sometimes some nice article where we can see that they are quite advanced. Probably the leaders in quantum communication. Probably top-notch as well in quantum computing, but it's a very close ecosystem. It's more like a black box. The research is done in the state labs. It's done in the large corporate labs as well. No such thing as a startup ecosystem as we see elsewhere. So it's a bit more difficult to follow. Yeah, it's different.
But actually, it's very interesting what you said, because what I have noticed as well from the different markets, like automotive or infrastructure and so on, China tends to incubate their technology for a long time inside. But once they feel they're ready, they really start very aggressive expansion around the world. Do you think something like that can happen as well for quantum?
I think quantum is a bit of a different game. It's been pointed out many times by governments as being a part of their sovereignty, because the first threat of a quantum computer in let's say 8 to 10 years will be the ability to decipher current encryption, and so I doubt that some governments would like to use Chinese technology
for that.
For such critical applications.
100%. So you think the governments would be more cautious about allowing the Chinese technology to enter and do not
repeat the same mistake we did in automotive or solar industry or the others, which are now basically Chinese dominated.
And there are some reflection in Europe, in the US on how do we get a supply chain in control and not depend on some rogue countries. And it's something that's been thought from the start from the government. They don't want to depend on some countries that they don't trust 100%. So it's probably something that public authorities have taken into account more seriously than for the past generations of technology.
That's great. That's great for Europe and great for US, of course. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the public support in the whole triangle. So if you think about the triangle of cooperation between the public sector, the government, the startups, and the VC, can you tell us a little bit more about the dynamic between this cooperation? How important is it? And what are the role plays, let's say?
I would say that quantum technology is a poster child for this triangle. Clearly, we are seeing some very nice public procurement programs, some grants, some financing for the R&D. We are seeing incentives for the startups. We are seeing collaboration with large corporates as well. It's pretty much well developed in all regions. So I think, quantum fits really well to this definition of maturing a technology through a whole ecosystem.
That makes a lot of sense. And obviously, government is so interested in quantum technology as well because of the encryption. As you said, not only what people usually think about encryption, they think crypto. But obviously, all of the bank legacy systems it could be very vulnerable on this. But there's also the whole defense thing, right? So quantum is crucial for defense industry. What are the other industries that you see that can benefit the most from quantum technologies? And what do you think, which of those industries will be the first who adapt?
Yeah. So quantum computing is good for accelerating certain type of mathematical problems. Broadly, three types of problems. First one is large optimization problems. And this would have application in logistics, in the banking industry, for example, portfolio optimization, some applications about pricing as well, derivative pricing. So banking, logistics, industry would benefit from the ability to solve those large optimization problems. The second type of application is simulation. So how to simulate new materials, new molecules, so complex computation. So this would have application in the pharmaceutical industry, in the chemical industry, how to synthesize some molecules with less energy, just more efficiently. Also some application in the computational fluid dynamics, so automotive, aerospace, and so on. And the third class of application would be accelerating machine learning. So typically finding some patterns to anticipate credit default or frauds and the same. I mean, this is quite broad applications, but typically banking could also benefit from that.
It's very good that you're mentioning as well. I know that NVIDIA is already working on their own synergy between AI and quantum, and I assume there's more companies doing it. So, but coming back to those industry, which do you think will be the first one?
So very often drug discovery and the banking and the banking industry are cited as one of the, let's say, low-hanging fruits.
I see. So pharma and banking.
From your previous point, I think one thing that's important to point out is that quantum will not replace classical computing, but will work in hybrid mode. And you mentioned NVIDIA, and NVIDIA has partnered with a lot of quantum computing companies.
Many from your portfolio,
exactly,
I guess.
And a lot of them from our portfolio as well, because the future of computing is being able to break down a hard computation into what goes to CPUs or GPUs and what goes to quantum computer. And maybe not only one sort of quantum computer. If you look at Pascal, which is doing computer out of neutral atoms, and IBM, which is superconducting qubits, they've partnered to do some go-to-market together. And the idea being, well, our machines won't do exactly the same thing, so why not use the two in a data center and use them where they are the most relevant?
That's a good example, actually, because I know that in your portfolio, you tend to invest in a different approach, even in terms of quantum computing hardware, right? There is a couple of black horses on the market, but can you let us know a little bit more? What's your investment thesis in terms of investing in the companies that are developing the same technology, but in a different way?
So I would even challenge the fact that it's the same technology. So if you build a quantum computer out of photons or out of atoms, it's a completely different game. If you are developing a CMOS compatible qubit like Kobli or Dirac, it's also a different game. So not the same fabrication process, not the same characteristic for the computer. So I mean, two photonics company, of course, they would be competitors, but different modalities of qubit
And not necessarily.
not necessarily.
But would the customer on the end, who will be probably the corporate, would they really care what kind of technology, they're going to use to solve the problem?
I think they care. So typically, a machine like Pascal can work in analog mode, so doing some nice simulations, solving some type of problem that the digital machine cannot solve. So if you are an end user, I mean, you don't really care how the machine works, but you care what it's able to solve.
That's true.
So I think the difference will be there, and there's probably room for several type of quantum computers. The way we try to address this issue is we try to find companies or technologies that we believe have a path to scaling. Because the machines are not big enough to get to what we call a quantum advantage or to solve industrial relevant problem. So we try to find some companies where we believe that will be the case.
Okay. And you mentioned that Pascal is working in analog mode as well. I would like you, for the benefits of the audience, explain that as well for a second. But another question, which is so much related to it, and I think it is popping up in many potential LP heads, is how do those early stage quantum startup making any money or building a traction, building a revenue, if the hardware is not ready yet?
So it's been, I think it's been a bit complicated for software companies, and we are not yet seeing as many companies as we wish in that market. For us, we've done two types of investment, two plays. So first one would be, let's say, very vertically integrated companies, typically some companies doing molecule design, some other doing computational fluid dynamics simulations, and what we have picked companies that are running their product and their simulation on GPUs today, but that will be able to integrate quantum when it makes sense. Because today, if you are a software company using 100% quantum, then I mean it's good for curiosity and people will try it out, but then they will say, okay, come back in 5 years when the machine are up to scale. Yeah. And we wanted to avoid this effect, and so we invested in companies that are relevant today and will accelerate thanks to quantum when the machines are to scale. The second type of play that we've made in software is more transversal play. So typically companies doing quantum error correction or companies doing algorithm compression, and therefore they can be useful as of today for a whole range of potential customers. So either the quantum computing hardware companies or the final the end user.
Thank you for that. Okay, that's helped a lot to see, and I think it can fulfill some of the curiosity of potential.
But we expect that there will be more and more software companies
in the next couple of years
as we get to more machine deployed. There's about 100 quantum computers deployed worldwide, so which is also a limiting factor.
Is it 100?
Yeah, about 100. So that means when you want to run a problem or simulate something, there's usually a bit of delay because the machines are all booked.
And most of them are in the research centers right now, right?
So, it depends what you call research centers. So typically, if you look at, I would say public data centers, but they are accessible to private clients as well.
Okay.
There are a few private clients, typically the Cleveland Clinic in the US, Saudi Aramco in Saudi Arabia. Yeah. It's developing, but you're right to say that most of the market is public data centers that can be accessed by researchers.
So I didn't actually know that. So the private companies can also access and just privately buy the access from those centers.
Typically, there are some companies, OVH in France has also purchased a Candela machine that can be accessed by, all the quantum computing hardware can be accessed through Amazon Braket or through Microsoft Azure, or they have their own cloud as well. So you can pretty much, IBM has put some qubit online as soon as 2016. So you could play with a few qubit and start developing some algorithms, small software.
So the early adapters were already there. Okay, speaking of the adaptation, and you mentioned a lot of those potential enterprise who who are adapting right now and gonna adapt even more. How this can be for benefit of Quantonation. I know that you have a couple of very interesting LP partners who are enterprise, right? If I can mention, is a BPI France, is a Toshiba, is a Novo Nordisk as well, right? So can you tell us a little bit more about the interest and appetite of enterprise to invest in an early stage startup?
So some companies, first, when they invest in a fund like us, it's more a global collaboration. They want to test some ideas that they have, or some develop some software algorithm with the startups in which we have invested. And second, for some of them, it can be a nice way also to invest at later stages in those companies. So typically,
exposure.
if you're a bank, exactly, if you're a bank and we've invested in, let's say, a company doing quantum for finance, and at some stage, it's not impossible that the bank would like to invest in the company.
Yeah, that's true. So exposure without the early risk.
Collaboration, global vision of the market, and also direct involvement and access with the startups.
That's very interesting. Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about building those quantum startups from the scratch. We know this is not as easy as, building startups is never easy, first of all. But obviously, building a quantum startup is a different story than building a SaaS solution or AI agent, right? Right now, when they could be, one person at home developing something and so on. This is a different story here. And I know the Quantonation has, for that specific purpose, established a venture studios. Yeah. And you have 4 of them right now across the world. One is in Canada, right? That was the first one. We have one in France, in Italy, and recently in New Mexico. Okay. So please tell us a little bit more about creation of those venture studio and also about those startups there. Like, what is the difference between the startups that have been incubated, I guess, and through the venture studio from those who were independently created?
So the idea of the startup studios started because in our first fund, there's a lot of companies. As you mentioned, it's not easy to create a quantum startup. So a lot of the companies in which we have invested, it was science or founders that we had met, and we thought they had great material to start a company. But it's a long process. You have to negotiate the IP with the research lab. You have to hire the first employees. And so it's a process that takes 12 to 18 months. It's hard work. You have to convince the researcher to either become the CEO of the company, or if he doesn't want and wants to be involved part-time, then you need to find some key people to start the company as well. So it's a whole process to create those companies. But the most successful companies that we have in Quantonation 1, in our first fund, come from that process. So the idea here was, how can we get to scale and do that with not only 2, 3, 4 startups, but the goal of each studio is to have 5 new companies per year. So over a period of 4, 5 years, it's 20, 25 companies that each studio is going to deliver.
So quality versus quantity, basically, in that case.
It's a lot. If you think about the 1,000 startups that we have seen, having 4 studios that will produce around 100 companies in a matter of a few years, it's very significant at the global scale. So really, it's a way for us to find some. So if there are some founders that are not yet sure, that have good ideas, and they are not yet sure how they want to develop their startup, then they get some support. And the studio can also find some nice technology and help the researcher spin off from the university. Developing those studios is a way for us, first, to build and to contribute to building an ecosystem, but also to accelerate and do company creation at a more industrial scale than what we would be able to do with the fund.
Okay, and are you planning a next studios, or are we keeping those 4, or there will be more expansion?
So we are keeping the 4. We've been contacted by some other countries or ecosystems, so looking actively at.
So there's definitely interest. Exactly. And so what kind of criteria have the country to fulfill to be a good partner for you to create a studio for them?
It's a bit the same as for the startup creation. You need a strong academic ecosystem and strong research labs, because that's where the companies come from. You need some public support, because the studio financial model is something that can be a bit precarious. So you need some that little help at the start to get started. Yeah, and you need some vibrant startup ecosystem because you need entrepreneurs and people who will pick on the idea and develop the company.
So basically, if any of the country or some representative of the government, different country, wants to set up such a venture studio, it's a good time to reach out, considering they have already some kind of startup ecosystem, they have academic strong background, and they have some funding, I guess, which is also crucial to run those studios, right?
Yeah, I think usually when you say you want to develop let's say a deep tech environment or deep tech ecosystem in a country, usually at some point you will have the goal to develop a studio for sure.
Perfect. Okay. And you mentioned as well that they need to have a strong startup ecosystem because we need those management and entrepreneurs. So let's talk about it. So the scientists who bring the technology or the development, the research, whatever is the grant, let's say, to build the product and services in the company, are they usually becoming founders? Are they usually becoming the CEO or CTO? Are they good at it? Or do we need to have external entrepreneurs with the specific background?
Well, we have all cases. Typically, the professor that does not want to jump full-time into the company and that will remain 20 or 30% of his time CTO or CSO of the company. We have the young PhD that will start the company and turn out into a great entrepreneur. And we have some that are good for the first steps of the company. Usually, when you develop a quantum company, the first 2 or 3 years are about replicating a lab experiment and transforming it into a prototype and a product. For this first step, it's not so different than what you are doing in a lab, so it can typically be the nice job for a researcher. Now, when the company gets to scale, from 20 people up to several hundred, starts to get clients, do some business development, then the required profiles are a bit different. And that's typically when some people with more, let's say, classical business development, finance background, or management background would enter the company. Some of the CEOs, even if they come from research, are very well fitted for that, and they will be able to go all the way. Some of them, at some point, will need some to onboard some more classical profile. But we really have management. All the cases in the portfolio.
Okay, that's very interesting because historically, it was always, I think, people have this impression that scientists cannot be a founder, and you're just proving that this is not true.
The scientists, when they run a 30-people research team and they have to get credits and they have to get financing and they are building the machines and they have their timelines and so on. So it's not exactly on the same timeline, but they are used also to challenges, management, deadlines.
Fundraising, just different through the grants and the management. Okay, that's a very interesting approach. I would like to change a little bit the topic. And let's talk right now about the trends that you see or you believe will be in a quantum ecosystem in the next 5 years from now. So let's talk a little bit about the vision for the future.
So, as I mentioned, the first important trend is scaling. The companies, when a few years ago they had tens of qubits, now getting into hundreds and soon thousands. Accelerating fast. The roadmap. So most of the players are publishing their roadmap, which is quite exciting to see where they are and where they want to be. A lot of them have the 10,000 qubit in sight at really, let's say, in 12 to 18 months. That would be the first trend.
So do you think we will get to 10,000 qubits before the 5 years from now?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Of course, there might be a bit of delay, but if you look at the roadmap of Pascal, IBM, it's clearly in
they're on the track.
They're on the track. That would be the first one. So more qubit. Second trend would be about better qubits. So that's about how to fabricate better machines, better qubits, so they are less prone to errors. But that's also how to use software to do quantum error correction. And what Google has shown, it was a year ago, is that we are now entering that phase where the qubits are good enough so that the more you compute, the more your computation converge, which was not the case before. So that's a huge difference. So first trend would be keep growing the number of qubits. Second trend would be about making better qubit and less error, so quantum error correction. Third one, I think, which is a very important one,
software
is
application. Oh, not yet. Sorry.
Interconnection and going toward the quantum internet. So far, the machine have been used independently. You're running a computation on a quantum computer, you retrieve the result, and then you send it to another classical device. Now, the interesting thing is that we are now starting to think about how do we interconnect the quantum computers. So for that, you need several bricks, you need quantum memories, you need some device to do the transduction. But it's a really nice prospect because it's very difficult to build a 1 million qubit computer. I mean, some people doubt we'll ever make it.
Yeah.
But what if you can interconnect some 10,000 qubit machines? I think that's a real trend, and that's a real acceleration of deployment of the technologies in the industry.
Okay, I think it will be possible one day. I'm like the really believer when you think about the history of standard event computing, right? The memories, how it grow and so on.
Sure.
A lot of stuff was impossible for the time.
No, you're right. But I mean, it's not only the quantum physics theory. It's also you need some progress in a whole lot range of technology. So typically, you need progress in lasers. You need progress in optics.
So technical limitations.
Exactly. But I mean, it's engineering problems. But when you overcome the problems and when all those sectors evolve and progress together, then that unlocks a lot of things for quantum as well.
Perfect. And when we can expect more software application?
I think it's starting. First, for that, you need some interest by the final users, end users, and this is only growing. I think there are some stats that around the Fortune 500, more than 300 companies have developed a quantum program.
Wow, already.
So they are.
Amazing,
I think they are starting to have teams. They have identified use cases. They are trying to develop some algorithm.
So wait a second. So you are saying that out of 500 Fortune companies, 300 of them have already quantum teams developing and experimenting?
Yes.
It's amazing.
And so I mean, at some point, so they start to play with things. But when a nice solution will come out of the counter from a startup, then probably they'll be able to purchase it and to use it. So I think, we expect more software startups. It's been a bit slow. It's been a bit difficult. But I think once we start crossing a threshold where the machines show relevance, once we start crossing a threshold where it's no longer in a few data centers, but there are 100 machines, what we like to articulate the timeline as the next 12 to 18 months. We are going to show more and more use cases where quantum will prove its relevance. That does not mean it's industry grade yet. And then the next 3 to 5 years, that's where you start deploying at scale. Not 100 machines, but several hundreds or several thousands. And that's when you can start using a quantum computer in everyday processes for large corporates.
What do you think would have to happen for those companies and enterprise to be like a breakthrough moment, like the creation of ChatGPT by OpenAI, when out of sudden, everyone there wanted to jump in and create those agents and so on and so on. Obviously, it takes 2-3 years, right? But it's relatively short period of time, and I think the same may happen for quantum industry. So, what do you think will be the breakthrough moment for those?
I'm not sure there will be a specific date. But it's gradual progress and starting to see that those technology can bring something to what you are doing. They can accelerate what you are doing. They can enable you to do things that you could not do before, and this will come gradually.
Could potentially one good implementation be that moment? So let's say if you talk about Pascal developing the machine to Aramco, which was the first industrial commercial sales in the world. Do you think if Aramco will implement or show or write a case study how the quantum computer really improved the business operation or logistic or mining or whatever they're using it for, that could bring more awareness? And
I think so. I will take another example, which is another example from Pascal as well, with Crédit Agricole. What they did was a use case was credit default anticipation. And what they found is that with a 100 qubit machine, and it was already 2 years ago, they had as good result as with the best classical methods that they had at the time.
Oh, really?
So
wow.
Now the next question was, okay, when do we start implementing this at scale? And for that's when we get to the next step. We need more machines.
Yeah,
and
we need more stable and scale and so on.
So I think it will come gradually, but I think the leaders the pioneers in that field have started to identify which are the relevant use cases that they can use those machines for.
Okay. Olivier, that's a great conversation. I'm just looking a little bit on the time. I think we are slowly wrapping up, but I have one last question for you. Okay, so is there any company that you wish you had a chance to invest in quantum ecosystem as Quantonation, but right now it's already too late or the company is too mature for?
So it's quite an easy question. I would take a company from our portfolio.
Okay.
Because we are an early stage fund, so there are limitations to the maturity in which we can invest. So
further.
my best wish would be to be able to follow on the companies in which we have invested at a later maturity stage. So if we want to look at what we want to do and what are our next projects, typically would be to launch a fund that's able to follow the best companies that we have at
But
the
that's
later
easy.
maturity
That
stage.
means that you need to create another fund, which will be focusing on the growth.
Exactly. But that means we're also very proud of the companies in which we've invested.
That's true. That's true. Okay. But outside of your portfolio, is there any company that you had ever a thought, maybe we should have invested in them, or I wish we were earlier there?
Quite frankly, I mean, no real regret. The choice we've made were for good reason. Some company we passed just because, I mean, we didn't have the vehicle to invest in. It could have been some nice one, but I mean, we could not do it. Some other we passed for some good reason. Maybe we were wrong,
The
but
technology was not there yet.
No regret.
Okay,
We're quite happy with what we've done.
Okay, I understand. I just thought that maybe you mentioned like one of the public companies or something like that, but I understand. Okay, that will be everything from my side. Thank you so much in my behalf and behind of the audience for being here with me today, with us in Quantum and Blond Quantum. So thank you so much. That was Olivier Tonneau from Quantonation. Thank you.
That was Blond and Quantum. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the quantum business frontier. If you liked the episode, please review on Spotify or Apple Podcast and help more people discover the quantum world without needing to untangle the theoretical physics. See you next time, unless the cat changes the timeline first.